This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
Max, the one to watch for the best in entertainment, now has live sports with the Bleacher Report sports add-on.
5, 4, 3, 2, I let one go.
Stream hundreds of select live games from MLB.
That's gonna go!
NBA, NHL, U.S. Soccer, and NCAA Men's March Madness.
We just see what we think we just saw!
And it's all included for a limited time with any Max subscription.
He got him!
After the promo period, add it for $9.99 a month. Base subscription required.
Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back up front when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. Terms apply.
Serie A Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Serie A Chronicles podcast. It's me, Nikki Fantini, and I've got with me, as ever, my fave, your fave, Mina Rizuki. Mina, how has your week been?
Oh, Nikki, it's been okay. I've started to resign myself to the fact that I may never get my voice back. And this is my new reality. But yeah, it's been an odd little week, to be honest with you.
We like your voice. We like your sexy COVID voice, your husky voice. We're going to call it that. It's deliberate. It's all part of a new style.
I got pulled over by the police because my front light had stopped working. I'm just like telling you. And then he stops me, and then like they're doing all these checks basically near where I live, and he pulls me aside and he's like, your front light is out and that's a driving offense. And then I was like, firstly, I didn't know that. Probably should have known that. Yeah. Secondly, he went, I'm so sorry. I just got out of COVID and I really haven't been driving. This is really the first time. And I just got the light signal to tell me that my light's out. So I'll definitely get that repaired. And all he kept saying was, oh my God, you poor thing. Are you okay? And I was like, it's a great way to get out of everything.
Oh my goodness.
I
Clever.
Suffering. Yeah, it was it. So I'm going to start, there's a part of me that doesn't want my voice back because I'm getting a lot of sympathy for stuff,
There's so many revelations in this anecdote, Mina, including the fact that you drive in London, which I am a total wimp about, like even having grown up in London my whole life. Like, no, London driving is scary.
Oh, no, I love driving in London, but I am a very aggressive driver. So I think it works well with me. But I am somebody who really gets upset with people who aren't aggressive drivers and who love queuing. And then I just, and then I'm quite a horrible person. That's when you see the darkness of me.
Do you know the only good thing about driving in London is once you've done that, because I went to New York one time and everyone was like, oh, you can't drive in New York, but I had to because I had to get a car out of town to New Jersey. And driving in Manhattan's super easy. Like it's 20 miles an hour. It's on the grid. It's very, very easy. You have to watch out because taxi drivers just pull out. They don't care. They just pull into you. But it's just a grid. It's just lefts and rights. There's nothing complicated about it. Anyway,
it's a complete tangent. Yeah, that's right. You're happy to drive in Manhattan, but you're not happy to drive in London.
Yes, much easier. It's like 20 miles an hour, the whole thing. Anyway, this has nothing to do with Italian football. It has nothing to do with the fact that we have a new website, Mina.
Whoop, whoop.
SerieAChronicles.com. Go there to find episodes, reviews. Send us a message for the Chronicles Q&A on the contact form, or record a voice message for us, guys. You can send us a voice message.
Why don't you sing?
You can also sing us a song. Do you know what? If someone sings us a really great song, we might even put it into an episode. You never know.
Yeah. I would so vote for that.
Producer Simon's face when I say these things is like, what's she saying? What's she saying?
Shut
up. You can also click the Chronicles Tifosi button, which will take you to our Patreon page to become a member and receive exclusive podcast episodes, which we're hoping to get started very shortly for you. And let's jump in right there, Mina, and give a shout out to our first Chronicles Tifosi patrons. We've got Stephen Lan, Chad Jobin, Noel Domi. I'm really sorry, by the way, if I mispronounce your name. It's always hard to know with names. Victoria Giordano, Filippo Cacamo, and Grant Friday. I'll let you do some, Mina.
There's Jill. Jill, I do love a person who just puts their first name like Madonna. I would so totally do that.
Keeps it simple.
But then there's the alternative in Edgar Allan Egurola Hernandez. I'm not sure I said that right, but I'm praying. Adam Borsella, otherwise known as Il Pandoro.
Yum.
Andy, James Hughes, and Chris Sullivan.
Thank you guys so much.
These are the first names. We'll keep reading out as you guys join. So thank you all so much for joining.
Honestly, it makes such a difference. We are a new podcast. We're still working this out as we go. Obviously, we had this idea. We wanted to make this podcast for you guys. We love making it, but we also need to make it sustainable. So you guys who are part of that, we really, really appreciate it. It does make a huge difference to us.
Yeah, we really do.
So, Mina, it's been a slightly weird week in Serie A. Weird's probably, I don't know. It's not a weird week. It's just an oddly scheduled week for us and our recording time. We record on Mondays and we've still got 3 out of 10 games this round that haven't taken place yet, including some pretty big ones. Milan haven't played yet. Napoli haven't played yet. So we're slightly at this odd recording time in the middle of the round, which is unusual, but there's still plenty that's gone on. And I think, predictable though it might be, I think the place to start this week is probably Juventus, because there's been 2 things that have happened in the last week with Juventus that I think are the big news. One is the Supercoppa, which is, of course, not just a Juventus story, it's also an Inter story. But the other one is at the weekend, Paulo Dybala scoring his goal against Udinese. And then the thing everyone's talking about in the Italian papers, certainly front page news for several of them, making a very pointed look up towards the stands, towards where it seems like the director said. He said he was just looking for a friend, Mina. He wasn't looking at the directors. He wasn't making a point about his contract. Do you believe him?
You know what? Max Allegri doesn't believe it. When Allegri was asked about it, did you see? I thought that was so funny from Allegri. He's still my father. Yeah, my dad's right. Don't lie. There's no one there. Come on, You're trying to make a point. Okay. Look, I think that he panicked because he did something, and then there's a part of him that doesn't want to get, told off and said that he's got a bad attitude, and he obviously had to think about it because what he did on the pitch came naturally to him. That was his reaction, sort of like the middle finger, and then afterwards he probably just thought, oh wait, I don't want to step too far, so let me just rein it back in and say I invited a friend, I've never invited before and who doesn't deserve to see the usual masked celebrations that I do. But on this occasion, I was looking for him.
And I just like to look mad towards my friends. I just like to look really mad at them.
Glare at them for not for showing up and supporting me. So I don't. But you listen, we've had conversations on this podcast in particular as well. Do you remember when we first started talking about contract negotiations and about possibly Dybala getting something like 10 million? And we did say, I don't know, I definitely said, let's call his bluff. There's a part of me that doesn't think he wants to leave. I think 10 million is an excessive amount of money to pay considering the financial situation in Serie A. Not just for Juventus, but really every club right now. You can see from the January transfer market how difficult it is for any of these clubs to try to reinforce their squad. Because everyone's looking for a loan deal with a potential to buy and no obligation. So 10 million for a player that hasn't played with too much consistency. Is he a great talent? He absolutely is a great talent. Is the guy making the difference right now for Juventus? He is the guy making the difference for Juventus at the moment. But we know with Dybala that it's been difficult for him to build momentum, to build consistency, to really prove himself as the undoubted leader. If I was his mother and I was advising him, I tell him, you know what, try something new. As a Juventus fan, obviously I don't want to lose talent, but I think to myself, like Arriva Bene, there's a part of me that's grown to like him a lot because he's a proper businessman. And proper businessmen don't have any romanticism and certainly don't love football in the way that others do. And there is a part of me that comes from a corporate world. Obviously, I've grown up in a completely banking atmosphere. You know, my partner runs mergers and acquisitions for Goldman Sachs. My dad is a banker. My sister's a banker. My whole world.
You used to work in that world, didn't you, Mina? I don't know if people know that about you, but that used to be your line of work for a while.
Absolutely, I was a trader. So for me, I understand corporate. Like I'm somebody who totally gets like Zlatan moving from one club to another to find his happiness. I don't see it as like being a diss or anything like that. I'm very much about the bottom line. I don't have any, let's keep Del Piero because he's our captain. No, he's all let's go. You know, like I'm one of those types of cutthroat people. And at the end of the day, we're talking about a player who is turning 29. So if we give him 10 million, let's say the contract is 4 years? Well, it's a lot of money until he's 33 years old, you know, and I don't potentially think that he's going to leave. I don't think there's other clubs out there that maybe there are, but maybe he doesn't want to join them. I think Newcastle will offer a lot of money for him. Does he want to go to Newcastle? He turned down Manchester United. Inter won't be able to offer more than 7 million, which is around what Juventus want to offer. And I think there is a part where you have to be clever about this. I mean, what they agreed on is 8 million plus 2 million in bonuses. But frankly speaking, I don't know. Like he's good, but that's what Kane's on. I mean, Kane's not off that by a lot, and Kane is, you know, the striker for England. He is a man that Tottenham's always relied on. Of course, he's had his fair share of injuries, but I'm with Dybala, I'm afraid it's too many injuries. I mean, he wasn't part of, you know, the Argentina squad in the Copa America. He barely gets really played often. When you look at the team squad, Lautaro Martinez is the man that they depend on a lot more than they would for Dybala. And yeah, talent is good, but how long are we just going to keep paying this guy a lot of money and not necessarily see the progress? This is the prime. He's 28. We're supposed to be seeing the best football ever. And he does well, don't get me wrong. But when you see Federico Chiesa come on, for example, in the second half, and I don't know, Allegri's going to roll the dice, you get excited. You think a goal's coming. Something's going to come. Wow. When he plays for the national team, you can't wait till Chiesa comes on, you know? You just know he's going to ruffle feathers and something's going to happen. When Dybala comes on, do you get that same feeling? Do you think, oh, yeah, goals are definitely going to come? No, you expect to see lots of beauty, but I don't know if he brings that same emotion.
Yeah, I think there's so many interesting threads to this. And we've talked about some of these things before in terms of like his reliability, certainly in terms of his, I'm sorry to say it, but his physical reliability, because he's injured a lot. But just to sort of, I guess, to ground this conversation quickly, like the big talking point that's been sort of discussed a lot in Italy in the last few days is that basically Dybala was told in October that the club was willing to do him this deal, or at least this is the story that's being put out by his side of things, by his agent, that the contract was on the table for 8 million euros plus a further 2 million euros worth of bonuses. And that what's happened since then, for 5 years, that would have been, since then, Juventus have thought, maybe we don't want to go to that amount. And that's obviously, that's his take home, that's his after tax. So it's you know, the cost for the club, you end up putting another substantial chunk onto that in terms of what you're committing to as a club. You're committing to nearly 100 million euros to this one player. Now, I think what's sort of interesting about this, well, there's lots of things interesting, but one thing that I think is interesting that hasn't been talked about perhaps so much. I had a conversation, funnily enough, about this recently with some people about Kingsley Coman and the big contract he got at Bayern Munich. I think when you see these big contract renewals being discussed, you have to remember to think about these from the perspective of what it costs the club to do something else. So you could say, look, re-signing Dybala, say that contract, including all the tax implications, is going to cost Juventus about 100 million euros. It's a lot. And I have a lot of concerns about investing that amount of money in that player. But what you are weighing up against is how much does it cost us to go and get a player of of a high enough quality who you also have to pay a transfer fee for, unless you think there's someone who you can get for a free transfer to avoid their transfer fee. And that's where this becomes a bit more of a complicated, I guess, layered conversation, right? Because sure, you would love to go get Dusan Vlahovic and have your number 9 spot tied down. Different players, by the way, of course, but you'd love to go and do that. As Juventus, go and get it as a striker you really feel excited about for a long time. But for Vlahovic, you're probably spending upwards of 70 million euros just on the transfer fee. And then you've got to pay his wages, his signing on bonus, everything else that comes with it. So the financial side of things is complicated, right? Like there's layers to it. And there is always a benefit. Even if you feel like you're overpaying a player's wages, there's always a benefit on the financial side to keeping what you've got, because you don't have to do that extra bit on top. You don't have to go and do the fees on top. Having said that, I think Juventus are making good economic decisions here. And I think it might be bad form to tell the player that you're going to pay him a certain amount in October and to turn around in January and say, actually, we're not willing to do that deal for you. It might not be good for your relationship with that player. It might not be good with your relationship even with agents going forward. But it's better for you as a club than tying yourself to a contract you don't want. And Dybala, he's hugely talented. And I've gone back and forth on this, but I do think he'll find a home if it's not Juventus with a competitive club. I don't know that he's worth to Juventus, who aren't Man City with limitless funds or some other club who can go, doesn't matter if it doesn't work out, it's just some money. I don't think it's worth for Juventus right now, with the financial situation they are in, to commit that much money to a player who, he's not there all the time. He just isn't. He's injured a lot. And his form in between those periods of injuries, it's up and down. Like he's brilliant when he's brilliant. He's genuinely, when you watch him doing things well, which he's done a few of in the last few weeks. I mean, I think about him and Federico Chiesa combining against Roma, and you think, oh my goodness, here are these two superstar players doing superstar things. But he doesn't do it every game, and he doesn't make it feel like it's going to happen every game. And at that point, with the injuries, do I think you really want to be tied to that contract? I don't know that you do. I don't think you've got any out for that contract if you sign it. I think if you sign that contract with him and he does get injured badly or his form doesn't live up to it, I don't think you're going to be able to sell him. And I think that's the really scary bit of doing that deal.
And I think that's what you put like perfectly well, because people are saying, well, listen, if you consider how much you have to pay if you want to get a Vlahovic or a top level striker, you have to pay a transfer fee on top of the wages that Dybala is looking for, or something, a figure close to that. And then you have to add on, obviously, everything with agent fees and all of that. So it's a lot more than what you just get with Dybala. But here's the thing is, what I may get is double the price. I may be paying that, but I'm probably going to get a lot more availability. Of course, you never know, right? But there's different types of players. You buy Ronaldo and you think to yourself, he's rarely injured. I mean, he's been rarely injured in his career. You look at Zaniolo and you think he's got all the talent in the world, but there's a part of you that worries about his availability, about his ability to overcome all the injuries that he's already sustained at a very young age. And we do have to look at injury records, because Ousmane Dembele, for example, is a beautiful player. He's one of the best to watch. But again, one is terrified to invest this amount of money into a player because you don't know if he's going to be there all the time. And you're looking at 5 years up until the age of 34. So I said to them, are you really comfortable with losing a player for free, considering the talent and the money that Dybala could have brought to Juventus? And the reasoning is they were never going to make money from him, as in to sell him. Because even if, say, they renew and give him the 10 million, because I was very much against Milan not giving Donnarumma that contract at the time. And I thought, you know what, it's worth paying that money, even going into debt almost to pay Donnarumma, because if you can't afford him in a year's time or 2 years' time, and you start thinking his wages are too heavy for your club, there is a market for him. You know you can sell him for 100 million. You know he will go because he will want to face more ambitious targets or do whatever it is. You know that he is still young enough to command a lot of money from the world's biggest clubs, and he's good enough. But with Dybala, let's just say he does sign on, and you realize that it's too draining on your accounts and he's not there enough or he's not doing enough. What are you going to do then? you're still not going to probably be able to sell him, because even if you want to, does he want to? That's the issue with Dybala. He has never shown any desire to really leave Juventus to win different trophies with different clubs, or have new experiences, or try new leagues. He's said no several times to others. There's been clubs that have shown an interest, and there's a part of me which thinks that's why Juventus are calling his bluff, because he is very attached to Turin and very attached to Juventus, and he's almost too comfortable.
2 years ago, the club was, 2019 was really sort of ready to say bye off you go to Manchester United. That deal was basically done, and it was Dybala who turned around and said no. That would have brought Lukaku to Juventus, and many different stories in different directions.
So there we go. So then if you do renew him and you think, I don't want to lose him for free, so I'll just renew it and then see if I can sell him, you won't be able to sell him. So either way, Dybala is never going to be sold for a fee. So you have to now make a decision. Do you want to invest 100 million in him, or potentially 200 million in someone else? And right now, when you consider the records and the fact that he's been in his prime now for 2 years, and you haven't really necessarily seen what you need to see. And not only that, it's not that even when he is available, he's a player who needs momentum. He needs various things to go his way for him to show his absolute best. What if the team changes their tactical plan? I don't think he's necessarily a flexible player that does different things for the club, in the sense that, if he's, Luka Modric, you'll keep him regardless, right? He's a player that will be versatile, and your midfield will always need him. Dybala is somebody who goes back a lot. He's constantly needing to be satisfied in various things. His partners need to be helped. There's always question marks surrounding his performances. And I think so, even if he is available all the time, he is a player that comes with various issues. He's not always happy. He makes that very clear. These types of things frankly annoy me. So yes, I would rather invest double the amount in a player, take a punt on maybe he won't be available too, but maybe he will. And I'd rather have a Vlahovic that I pay 200 million for than 100 million for Dybala, and for the next 5 years face the same issues that I faced in the last 5 years. There are moments of magic, sure. But at the end of the day, he doesn't give me that feeling that I get when I watch a Vlahovic or when I watch a Chiesa, which is, you're definitely going to change the match. I still question his attitude. I still question his mentality. And the very fact that, now he's doing all of these things, show me that you are willing to move to a club and actually win trophies. Show me that desire to go above and beyond, Show me you arguing on the sidelines with various different people and dying for your club. I've never seen that from him. I'm sorry, I haven't. I don't even see him stay on his feet long enough when he's being tackled to be like, I'm dying to get the goal in. So I think he's a very, very talented player, but I need a lot more, and I'm willing to invest a lot more. So from a business point of view, this entirely makes sense to me, because you're going to lose anyway. You're never going to get a transfer fee for him. It's about whether or not you want to pay 10 million going forward for the next 5 years.
Okay, so let me ask you a different question here then, Mina, because I don't want to burst your bubble, and I know you are clinging on to the Vlahovic dream. I don't blame you, because what a player, what a dream to cling on to. My expectation is that Vlahovic is not going to go to Juventus. I think he's going to go to the Premier League. I think that's going to be how this shakes out, unless I don't know, one of the big La Liga clubs steps in. I think he's going to go to a Premier League club that's playing in the Champions League. That's my expectation. I think it will happen not this January, but in the summer. So take Vlahovic off the table for a second, and now just consider with me a future in which Dybala does go at the end of the season. They can't make this work. They can't find a middle ground on the contract. He goes at the end of the season, and instead of bringing in a Vlahovic, you're bringing in, to pull a name out of the air that's in my mind, a Scamacca, a Berardi, something of that level. How do you feel about it then? Do you have any regrets about Dybala going? Because I think Juventus might have to go through this. I do think Juventus might have to go through this. I think Juventus might have to go through a bit more of the rough road before they get back to the smooth, if I'm being honest. I think they're still unpicking a lot of very expensive deals that they put themselves into, some of which, the obvious one, Ronaldo, you can argue still back and forth about whether you thought it was worth it. Some of which I think everyone agrees weren't worth it. Ramsey, Rabiot, these deals, like they've set the club in a particular hole, really. It's the big reason I don't think Vlahovic will happen. If it was that, if the offer on the table is not Vlahovic, but it's, a couple of years of tight belts and something on the level of Scamacca coming in to be your number 9 and no Dybala, are you then thinking, oh, hang on a second, give me that deal back on the table for a second?
No, I think that it's better to go back to very old school ways, like when Juventus first started the project under Antonio Conte, and really just go for players that are super cheap and very talented players, and hopefully build them up to be the superstars that they are. And that does mean sometimes going for like a Paul Pogba that was a free, and Morata that was, cheap as well, free as well, and then build them up to be the superstars that they then went on to become. But you see, here's the thing. I don't feel like in any way, shape or form it makes business sense. On a romantic level, Dybala is you always want your talented players to stay where they are, even if they're unavailable. If I had a bunch of money, then I would buy all the bags and shoes in the world, But at the end of the day, if I have to think cleverly, then I have to say I'm not getting my values worth. And you have to think like a business. And so it's about 100 million that I'm paying. What am I getting in return? Am I getting more than 20 goals a season? Am I getting a guy who makes the team tick? So if my alternatives are, Scamacca and Berardi, then obviously, no, I am disappointed. I think they're wonderful players, but I don't necessarily want them. Ideally speaking, if I am going to start from scratch and I have neither option, then I would rather say, well, listen, if Mbappe and Haaland might choose Madrid, then I'd like to get Benzema if he's available, If he wants an opportunity and a chance, I'd rather give him 100 million, frankly speaking, even at his age. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? I could almost believe that sort of transfer. I could imagine him wanting a different adventure at the end of his career, and Juventus being the sort of club that would offer that. That's an interesting idea.
Or even if Dries Mertens is not going to be renewed at Napoli, then I'd rather have a year with him until I rebuild my squad and find myself some sort of financial stability and start to once again invest in the right talents. But in that, what I was speaking with actually an agent last Tuesday at dinner, is he said there's a huge market now for over 30s because there's a lot of clubs that won't pay a huge contract, Chelsea, Real Madrid, And then there's a huge contract for the young ones. But those in-betweens, your Harry Kanes, your Lukaku's, Lukaku, it was just on the cusp, right? I think that he managed to leave at the right time to get a huge contract. But at 28, 29, you think to yourself, do I want to invest 100 million in a transfer, cost of a player for 100 million, pay all these wages when I know that in a few years' time he's going to be over 30 and I don't know, I'd rather invest all that money in an Mbappe and a Haaland and a Vlahovic and a Jude Bellingham and all these youngsters that are coming out. And then you see the older players, your Agueros, obviously not anymore, but, your Luis Suarez and those older ones that still provide so much experience and beauty, but come at a much smaller price tag. And so considering we have a lot of youngsters at Juventus, and Allegri has talked about that, Locatelli's, whatever, Pellegrini's, then maybe it is useful to just, invest in the older players until we find financial stability and then one day dream of a Vlahovic again. But I still think we're in it for Vlahovic. I do.
Scamacca scored a pretty tasty goal this weekend, by the way, as Sassuolo did lose, but a gorgeous scissor kick during their defeat to Verona. I think we should, we've covered Dybala. I think we should talk quickly, Mina, about that Supercoppa that got played in midweek, since we're on the topic of Juventus. I really enjoyed it as a game of football. I thought it was sort of fun in that both teams gave what was good about themselves. Inter are a better team than Juventus. We've been talking about that for weeks now. They just are. But I felt like in that game, at least, we saw the best Juventus that we can get right now, I think. I think we saw the sort of Allegri version of it, where it was resilient, where it was a sort of compact and nothing given up for free type of performance. And it got decided at the end of extra time by something very sort of opportunistic and I thought rather brilliant by Alexis Sanchez. Alexis Sanchez is its own story we should probably talk about in a second. But quick thoughts on Juventus and the Supercoppa and where you see things right now.
Listen, to be honest with you, I mean, when I watched Inter against Atalanta, I saw what Atalanta did, and they didn't have a lot of their, starting lineup. But what they did was very much what Juve wanted to do, and yet they're not yet capable of doing, which is engage in duels, try to neutralize the strengths of players like Brozovic, and make sure that they don't build and their momentum and construction phase. But Juventus were without Szczesny, Bonucci, Quadrado, Chiesa, Dani. I mean, there's just a lot of players that they don't have at the moment. And right now, like you said, their squad is just not good enough. Not when you're facing Inter at the level that they're at, with the momentum that they have built, the squad depth, and the fact that they're not really missing anyone, you know. But having said that, I'm proud of Juventus in the sense that they did score their first goal. They did come out trying to do as much as they can to really stop this team. They took it to extra time and went to the very last minute. Unfortunately, it was about trying to bring on Bonucci for the penalties. It's stupid. It's foolish. We talk about it all the time when Southgate wanted to do it with like his penalty takers against Italy. Like, why would you decide to do the same things? Obviously distracted everyone at Juve, and Alexis Sanchez, who deserves a huge mention for how much he's fighting for this team, and Inzaghi for just getting everyone in that team on board, the whole squad on board, fighting, scoring, defending. It's really a wonderful group project. But to last that long after Roma and all the exertions of that match, maybe it is the confidence that they built there. I thought it was impressive, and I'm sorry, I know that it's not entertaining football from Allegri, but I was proud of it.
Yeah, I think Juventus might just be rounding the corner, not all the way. I don't think Juventus are going to be suddenly title contenders. They're not. They're not there with Inter at all. And I think this game really did remind us of that gap. But that's not what they're aiming for. They're trying to get into the top four, and I think they're starting to look more like it. Inter, as you say, I thought this was this is what I mean when I said like I felt like both teams gave like a true version of themselves, because I thought that Juventus gave that this is the best we can do right now. This is the dogged, the resilient, the Giorgio Chiellini version of us that we can be sometimes still under Allegri. And I thought the Inter equivalent was reminding us yet again, and we've talked about it over and over again on this show, look at our squad depth, look what we have, because you just give Lautaro and Dzeko the hook together in the 75th minute. And a bit of me, honestly, was tearing my hair out, Mina, thinking, what are you doing, Inzaghi? You can't take them both off. This is your momentum. This is your attacking potential.
I thought exactly the same thing.
And then it's Alexis Sanchez who scores the winner, having also, by the way, gone really close before in extra time. The only real chance of extra time, I felt like, was his header that was, a foot wide of the post. So, the result bears him out. And that has been the story most of the time this season. However, they did drop 2 points this weekend against Atalanta. This is another really fun game, I thought. A 0-0 that you couldn't quite fathom how it was a 0-0 by the end of it, because both teams with some real chances, both teams trying to play attacking football. This wasn't like a defensive 0-0 with nothing happening. Samir Handanovic with maybe even a man of the match performance. I'm not sure for Inter, but certainly a good performance. I thought this was another really compelling game. I think both teams could sort of pull out and say more positives for themselves. I think from Inter's point of view, look, they are the front runners right now. As we're recording, they're still top of the table. Milan can go ahead of them if they win tonight. However, Inter will still have a game in hand. So effectively, Inter are in pole position. And from pole position, you maybe start to look at the games you've got left this fiction. And Atalanta away from home is one of the hardest ones, right? So if you get a draw there, you're thinking, all right, I can cross that off and put a draw next to it. Now, on the other hand, Atalanta not at full strength for this game at all, missing some really important players. So maybe then Inter start to think, maybe this is a game we should win. And then you look at how it went, and I think in the end, probably both teams walk away. Inter saying, well, this could have gone worse for us, actually. We got the draw. It's a tough game out the way. It's a good result. Atalanta look at it and think, well, we maybe had the slightly better chances. We could have won. It was at home. But again, we've got Inter out the way now and it's done. I felt like by the end, it was one of those draws that both teams could walk away from feeling quite good about themselves.
Yeah, but I definitely... It's interesting because when you watch, obviously, Inter against Juventus, you think Juventus did a remarkable job despite the fact that, they didn't have a lot of their players. Or you think to yourself, okay, I mean, you're so poor, but you're actually keeping up with this Inter side. But Inter deserved the win overall. Like when they did, finally get it through Alexis Sanchez, they played the better game. Their construction was better. Their movements were better. they were just the better side, and you could just see Juventus trying all they can, even though they had chances with Bernardeschi and whatever it is. But when I watched Inter against Atalanta, and I think of how many players were missing, including like Ilicic and Zapata, they're forwards who have the lucidity to score and the cynicism to score those beautiful chances or to make the right pass and choose the right decisions, even if they are fatigued. For me, this was Atalanta dropping points, and Inter were lucky, in my opinion, on that. I know they did play a very good game, but it was interesting to me how much they were neutralized despite the opponent. And here's what really bothers me about this. How can Atalanta be capable of a match like this and then not manage it against young boys in the Champions League? And not manage it against, who was it that Villarreal? It is irritating, beyond irritating for me. You had 36% possession. You had no Gosens, no Ilicic, no Zapata, no one. You had very few players on the pitch. And more importantly, look at their bench. Most of them were kids. They had 3 real players as alternatives, and that was pretty much it. And they were exhausted. And yet, once again, in the second half, there were just moments where they controlled, they created, they had more shots on goal. And I look at that and I think, I don't understand Atalanta. You can be really amazing sometimes when you put all your life into it. And sometimes I'm rather amazed by how open you are at the back. But the fact is they do have a blueprint. It's very difficult to do. It's very fatiguing, if you like, very tiring to do. But for me, that was interesting. I mean, they really did stop Inter in their tracks, and I felt like Inter didn't have a way out. They couldn't breathe at the moment. It was I can't actually say that word.
Asphyxiating. It's, I think, what you're trying to say.
Yes, it is. Pressure for them, and the fact that their goalkeeper was man of the match, considering their squad depth, considering the players they had on it, considering their confidence. But there is a part of them that's a little bit exhausted from what they did midweek. So there is that. But Atalanta also played midweek, also don't have squad depth. So, but for me, I feel like this is more upsetting for Atalanta than it is for Inter.
Yeah, I mean, Atalanta, it was interesting, right? As you said, Atalanta had about a third of the ball, but probably the better chances. I really, there's so many players in this squad to enjoy, though. Yeah, they were missing some really big ones. And it's funny because I think that's a big part of why they didn't get through that Champions League group.
Yeah.
There's circumstances. Well, I think Atalanta's Champions League experience this season is I almost find it impossible to view it in one lump. It's like there's these little chapters to it. Because, for instance, I thought the game away to Villarreal, I thought they were really good. And I thought 2-2 was probably fair, but they were closer to winning it than Villarreal were. And in our last game against Villarreal, I still don't know, and we will never know how much that was impacted by the last-minute postponement, having to play it early in the day, a day later. Like that sort of thing disrupts your routines, disrupts your planning, and it affects both teams. I'm not saying that as a excuse, but it was rescheduled because of the snow, and it's disruptive. You don't know. They didn't get the normal sort of attendance and crowd they would have had. All of these things are intangibles, but I think that can affect a story. And then, yes, they were missing 3/4 of their defense for a lot of that group stage as well.
Yeah.
I think it's always fun watching this team and seeing, against Inter, yes, you're missing Zapata, but then you're thinking, my God, Pessina's so good. Pessina's a really
isn't he
enjoyable?
I'd love to have him at Juve. Yeah,
I know you love him, don't you?
I would love to have him at Juve.
Really? He's a Juve player. He's quite an Allegri player, actually, isn't he?
Isn't he? He's such an Allegri player, right? And he would make all those insertions. He's versatile. He's Locatelli's best friend. I mean, it just makes sense.
Maybe. Look, I mean, Atalanta are not known for hanging on to their players too long, are they? So don't rule that one out at all. Not right now, but for the summer, who knows? But I think he's really maturing nicely. Luis Muriel is obviously on fire at the moment, and there were moments in that game when he went through, and you thought, "Oh, something's going to happen." Paslic was great in this game as well. I thought they're a team with such sneaky depth, right? Like it doesn't feel like Inter's depth, but they've got so much depth in that squad. To go back to Inter quickly, I feel like we have to at least talk a tiny bit more about Sanchez. who of course scores that winner in the Supercoppa and then gives one of my sort of all-time is massively exaggerating it, but certainly recent times favorite post-game press conferences saying that he's a monster, saying that he's a lion in a cage, and that when you release a lion, you get this, you get the champion, and mixing his metaphors. And he said, the only thing that's kept me back is not getting enough minutes on the pitch. When you put a champion on the pitch, you get results. And I want to know if you buy into that, Mina, if you think Inter just need to play Alexis more, or if you think, as I do, if I'm being honest, that Dzeko and Lautaro is still the first choice partnership and needs to be.
Yeah, I know. There's been a lot of talk of, Dzeko hasn't scored since the 4th of December. Is he tired? But I'm sorry, in my books, I would still choose Lautaro Martinez and Dzeko. And not because I don't think Alexis Sanchez is good enough, but because weirdly enough, it's a little bit, do you remember when we were talking about Chiesa in Italy and we were discussing about the fact that if he comes on, he just would make all the difference, but you don't necessarily play him for the full 90 minutes? Even though he's one of the most exciting talents. Sometimes, I don't know, with Alexis Sanchez, I feel like he's a great player and he does deserve more minutes, and I totally understand what he's saying is, and look what I can do. But I also do love the fact that when he comes on and he has all this energy and he's facing more tired opponents, and then he can rely on his intelligence, his movement, his execution, his speed of thought. And it makes it's almost like a super sub. And I know that he hates that. But listen, I mean, his performance in the Supercoppa is what allowed him to start the game against Atalanta. But yeah, I love him. But can I also just one more thing that I want to say about it?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I think it's great that they didn't win this match. And I know that sounds awful, as in when you think about their points, because Milan no, don't worry. Yeah. Inter's still going to win the Scudetto, but I think it's a really good time for them to suffer. It would have been better if they suffered a bit more. The only reason I say this is because the Champions League is coming up and they need to figure out what their vulnerabilities are and rescue them now, so that, they need to face opposition that will play differently, that will stifle them, that will neutralize them, that will put them under pressure so that they can find the solutions. Because if it's all smooth sailing and everything is so easy for them, then I feel like they'll get a shock in their system when they go into, obviously, the Champions League. You're facing Liverpool, right? So I want them to be put under pressure. I want them to keep growing that mentality to say, no, it doesn't matter. We can overcome this, and see potentially where their moments are, or where they are put under pressure, and how they can resolve those issues in advance. I do think, like Allegri used to always say, it's important to have defeats along the way, or moments where you think, wait, hold on, this is something we weren't thinking about because it was also good going. Everything was so easy for us. But actually, when people point out where your vulnerabilities are and you do face opposition that really go for you, I think it really helps in the long run.
It's definitely it's going to be close, at least for a while longer. And Milan have Spezia, and by the time you hear this, if you're listening, you probably will already know the results of that game, but it hasn't happened yet as we're recording. Napoli have Bologna. I expect Milan to beat Spezia. They started the year well, and that means Milan back on top of the table. Again, Inter with the game in hand, but
yeah,
I like it. It's good for the energy of the title race to have two teams very much contesting it. Napoli, by the way, with a tweet congratulating Inter and Atalanta on such a well-played game. What did you think of this, Mina? It's a bit of a sort of random side story, but there was a lot of reaction to it. Why have Napoli just tweeted at Atalanta and Inter saying that they played the game very well?
I didn't actually see the reaction to it. What were people saying? Why are you doing? It's very sporting.
I think there was just a lot of verbal raised eyebrows, really. It's not a thing that you see that often. And I suppose everyone was looking for what's the story behind this? Who's winding who up? But maybe it was just a genuinely honest message if we enjoyed that game.
I think it's when you hear 0-0, especially when it's between two big teams, rather, you just think everyone is, stifling the other and everyone's too scared to lose, so they're not really giving it their all. But this was a game in which you could really see them both trying to win it, both had their chances, and it was exciting. It was a very thrilling 0-0. It was old school Serie A, intelligent, tactical, but not so much heavily dependent on defending. And Yeah, I honestly thought it was a genuine, oh, we like this game, like, well done. But I didn't realize there was a reaction to it, so I don't know.
Well, maybe that is exactly what it was. I just thought I'd raise it because people were talking about it on the internet, which is always the main reason we have to talk about anything, right? I should.
Yeah, exactly.
Mina, I know you don't need any persuading. I don't need any persuading to talk about the wonders of Ivan Juric, but I think we definitely should talk about Ivan Juric and Torino. Really fantastic week for them, thumping Fiorentina 4-0, and then following that up by beating Sampdoria 2-1. This was their first away win since September. It doesn't sound as sort of immediately impressive, obviously, as beating Fiorentina 4-0, but it's an important result. And I think it's the first time they've taken points from losing position this season as well, actually, which is something quite striking. I don't know if we've probably talked enough about Torino this season. It's hard sometimes, especially for a club that in the end probably is still going to finish in the middle-ish positions. But Torino were 16th and 17th the last two seasons before Ivan Juric comes in. He's got them up to 9th at the moment. They are 15 points better off than they were last season. And they have got one of the tightest defenses in all of Serie A. I just sort of want to highlight to people as another sort of team in Serie A that play really interesting football. It's not as obviously interesting as some teams that are scoring 3 or 4 goals, because they're the opposite of that, Torino. They are playing with this ultra aggressive high press. And I actually wrote about this for the Guardian today. I find it quite a fun analogy because Juric is this self-professed fan of death metal music, right? Like real, like hard, heavy metal. And I think it's this sort of fun, like line that you've got Jurgen Klopp, who famously talked about heavy metal football in the Premier League and where he wanted to play. And this is like a step further again, because if you watch the way that Torino press, I mean, the Fiorentina game was extraordinary. It's so wildly aggressive. It's like a blend of that idea of like just constantly be on the ball, and then Gianpiero Gasperini's ideas, because of course Juric worked under Gasperini at Genoa and as a player and a coach. Gasperini's ideas of one-on-ones all over the pitch. And you end up with this just, again, ultra aggressive way of playing where you are trying to attack, particularly in the opposition half, the ball every single time, constantly. And you end up with a team that commits, by some measure, like by a way, the most fouls in the division, but is nowhere near the top of the yellow card table because it's always committing these fouls deep in the opposition half, because it's just constantly on players' touches, constantly disrupting teams from getting started with their moves, constantly stopping opponents from even beginning to sort of deploy their passing actions. And I think it's really sort of, you know, we like to think of Serie A as a constantly tactically interesting league. It's what all players talk about when they go to Serie A from foreign leagues, how much more evolved the tactical thinking is. And I think Juric is out there doing something that marks him apart. And I think it's really working for a team that actually has lost its regular goal scorer. Belotti has been injured for most of the season. Top scorer in that team right now is Brecalo, who scored 5 times. He's found a solution that not just makes them viable, but which has made them, again, 15 points better than they were last season. I think he's doing remarkable work.
I mean, remarkable, honestly, is just, yeah, it is absolutely the word to describe what Juric is doing. He is, like you said, a self-confessed fan of Gianpiero Gasperini, very much his disciple. I look at his football, I look at Igor Tudor's football and Gasperini's football, and for me, it's the type of football that really starts to get my heart racing, and that is the kind of football that I really, really enjoy watching. It's just so aggressive. Their identity is always maintained. And I think this is what's so interesting about this team, is that mostly what I have thought about them under Walter Mazzarri, under Davide Nicola, and obviously Marco Giampaolo, who I think is the worst coach in the world, but actually might be a good solution for Sampdoria, despite that. But it's the mentality. Torino was so weak. You just felt like there was a moment before that Torino, for me, were always a tough club. You know, when I thought about their derbies against Juventus, I was scared, you know. Pirlo needed to wait until the very end to score against them. Torino were a strong side. not necessarily fun to play against. And somewhere along the line, sort of at the end of Bolton Mazzari's tenure, I feel like they lost something on a mentality level and they became very soft. They lost their concentration far too easily. They couldn't score goals. They had no confidence in their maneuvers. There were just so many individual errors watching them play. And Nicola tried to change that towards the end, but you could see that this was a side that was really, it had fallen by the wayside and it really needed resurrecting. And I thought Cairo made a great choice in choosing Ivan Juric, who had done amazing work at Hellas Verona. And he had no budget, no money at the time. Lots of those players were there just on a dry loan and eventually being sent back to their clubs. So they had no necessity to really prove their worth because they were going to leave anyway, no attachment to the shirt. And yet he managed to create this beautiful Verona side that held the likes of Napoli, that caused all the big clubs so much pain. I mean, just, like you said, it's the jewels all over the pitch. And now we're seeing it with Torino. He was so upset when he first arrived and he said, this isn't a good enough team. And it's little things like Vojvoda, when he said he's just such a good guy. I didn't let him come anywhere near the ball or anywhere near my starting team in the first 2 months of the championship. And then slowly I saw what he did in training. And it's that understanding that he has with his players, that relationship he develops where it is partly, it's like we have business here, but we also have personal. So I can be your friend and I can say, this is what I think you should do. But I still will let you play. But if I see that you deserve it, then I will let you play. And I feel like the team, Dennis Pratt, Marco Piazza, for example, Mandragora, when he's been available, Bremer has had an amazing season, Brekelau. There are problems up front. I think that, honestly speaking, if they were cleverer in their last pass, they would be scoring so many more goals. But it is a gradual ascension. It is this gradual progression that they've been making. Like you said, this is only their second away home win of the season. The first one was obviously in September. So that's remarkable. When you look at their last 5 games, they've lost only once, and that was to Inter. So they are growing. They are better at dominating the ball. And this is only the second time in the 3 points for a win era that Torino have managed over 30 points in the opening 21 rounds. And so that, you can see the development of the team that, honestly speaking, like you said, doesn't even have Belotti. And you look at that squad and you're not going to really go for any of these players. You don't look at them and think, even Empoli has a couple that I'd probably want on my side, but I look at Torino and there's really nothing that I would particularly want. And they've lost Rincon recently, I don't necessarily look at their players and think, but the mentality is changing. This is their first comeback victory since the 18th of April. I mean, we're talking about nearly a year, So it is impressive of the mentality changing, of their concentration defensively. They were always good at, keeping a tight defense at the back, but I felt like their concentration was poor at the start of the season. But now I think it's a lot better. Really, if they can just eliminate the individual errors and perhaps, I don't know, have Belotti back, then it would be a really exciting team. They just need to be better away from home. But wow, Ivan Juric, Igor Tudor, Gasperini, they're just terrific coaches.
Yeah, the Gasperini tree sowing seeds over the rest of Serie A at this point. Other stories this week to mention, because we've been going a while, but let's rattle through some of these other things that went on quickly. Sergio Oliveira, new signing at Roma, immediately steps in, wins a penalty, wins the game. Fantastic start for him against Cagliari. Not perhaps the sort of biggest, most daunting game that Roma will face, but 3 points are 3 points, and they probably needed it after that Juventus game and everything else that's happened recently.
Yeah, and the penalty, scored it, showed his leadership. I think that Mourinho is the type of coach that likes veteran experience and amongst his team. And I think Oliveira really, I saw him praying before the match even started and thought, this guy wants to make the difference. And having said all of these things, and Roma were impressive and it is a win, it was very close and they nearly conceded at the end. So I'm also want to, give a shout out to Cagliari, 2 wins in a row. They came to Roma. It was a tough game, but they really did terrify them at the end. And I thought that they were probably about to get an equalizer, but luckily Mourinho held on and Roma managed to get a win.
I agree with all of that. We had 2 sackings since our last podcast, Mina. Sampdoria watched that game against Torino and said, right, that's the end of the line for you, D'Aversa. And before that, Genoa also bid farewell to poor Andriy Shevchenko, who I don't know what to think with Shevchenko in the end. I think he arrived at a terrible time in the fixture list. They played some really tough games, but he also didn't get results in the games against the lesser teams when they did come along. There were a few that they were targeting they didn't get. I think it feels like a situation where you have to imagine that he expected when he signed that contract that it was a case of get to January, let's see some January investment and go from there. And I suppose he'll feel like that never happened. Sampdoria have brought in Marco Giampaolo. Genoa are yet to make a permanent appointment. They've got Conco in there right now as the caretaker. Mina, any strong feelings on these decisions? My first thought is simply, my goodness, Genoa, new ownership and still the same old habit of changing managers every 30 seconds. I think they've now got 3 currently still receiving paychecks from them because Shevchenko, of course, in that very Italian way, has been fired, but not actually released from his contract. He's just been put on gardening leave.
Yeah, and I think that it's a little bit harsh considering how many absences he's had. I mean, there's been games where he didn't even find enough bodies to field. So I do feel a little bit sorry for him. I mean, this was still a team that managed to hold Atalanta to a 0-0 remarkably on the game before Christmas. And they really knuckled down and defended. But even with 30% possession, it's not a great team, let's be honest with you. I mean, Ballardini had all these types of problems. Shevchenko came in at a terrible time. And it's a very odd decision to make, to go with him and then not to back him or give him time for him to show us what they can do. That, he wanted players to be bought in the January transfer market. Nothing was really done. No one even wanted to speak to him about the topic. So I feel a little bit sorry for him. I feel less sorry for D'Aversa. I feel like he tried lots of different things, but I think he was almost a little bit out of his depth when he came to Sampdoria. I thought the side was entirely dependent on Gabbiadini and Candreva's individual initiatives. He never really got the team to move. They're very passive in the way that they play their football. And they, for me, totally deserve that loss to Torino and all the others that they've suffered. So I'm interested to see Marco Giampaolo back because I'm not a fan of his, obviously. But Sampdoria is where he wasn't as bad as he was with everyone else. So it'd be interesting to see what he can do and whether or not he can get them to be more of a proactive side. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think, I don't know, I'm not a Giampaolo believer. I'm uninspired by it as an appointment. I appreciate it's not the easiest time to make changes in the middle of January, but I don't know. I'm not certain that either of these 2 clubs in the city of Genova have particularly got an encouraging sense of direction about them at the moment. I don't think these changes are going to change that. I mean, of course, as I said, we're still yet to see who Genoa will set on as a more permanent choice. But where we are right now, only other thing I wanted to mention quickly this week, Mina, Nani, of all the people you thought you might not have seen in a while, Nani signing for Venezia and within moments of coming off the bench, setting up their goal at the weekend. So another fun, nostalgic return to Serie A for Nani.
Yeah, it was really exciting. And I just feel like, I mean, God, they really do have the most international team, but how exciting to have Nani back and already making the difference with his experience and intelligence on the ball. But Nani is where we leave it. We'll be back on Friday with Chronicles Q&A mailbag show. Check out our new website at seriachronicles.com. How fabulous of us to have a place to go to.
Website.
I know. And join our Patreon and become a Chronicles Tifoso. Get access to exclusive podcasts, all coming very soon. Get your questions in on Twitter at SeriaChronPod with the hashtag Chronicles Q&A. And of course, you can find us on Twitter at Nicky Bandini, at Mina Rizuki. I will be a little bit more active there from now on. I just took some time off. And subscribe to the Serie A Chronicles YouTube channel for clips of the show. Leave us a rating and a review, obviously only if they are positive, on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. But thanks to Nicky, And thanks to you, listener, for joining us for this episode. And we'll see you next week. Ciao.
Chiede il pallone, lo ottiene il bosniaco, cerca ancora e trova a sua volta Dybala, il quale allarga sulla corsia di sinistra. Asamoah è pronto al cross, eccolo che parte insidioso, salta Mandzukic, sponda Dybala, rete! La Juventus è in vantaggio. Esattamente al 22esimo minuto, nel corso del primo tempo, cambia il parziale allo Juventus Stadium di Torino. Grandissimo gol di Paulo Dybala, grande assistenza di Mandzukic, ma la Joya da 22 metri, facendo perno sul piede destro, ha battuto di collo esterno sinistro a mezza altezza, immobile Beriscia. 1-0 in favore della Juve.
È stato veramente un gran colpo, veramente una bella azione quella della Juventus, il cross di Asamoah lunghissimo dalla parte opposta, la sponda meravigliosa di Mandzukic, ma soprattutto il sinistro al fulmicotone di Paulo Dybala, che ha lasciato di stucco l'estremo difensore dell'Atalanta Beriscia. Per lui niente da fare, perché il sinistro di Dybala si è insaccato a mezza altezza alla sinistra del portiere, per la gioia dei sostenitori dello stadio.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Okay, round 2. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.